Howdy y'all, welcome back, thank you for being here. What truly makes a culture thrive? What sort of societal norms, whether ancient or modern, have become so commonplace amongst the masses that we simply have swept understanding their inner workings under the rug? Could history be one of these things? Most education systems, especially public education systems, have narrowed down the topic of history into such a tight-knit box aligning only the main principles of a narrative with the goals of the education system, seemingly weeding out the rest of the relevant information. This is not a new practice at all. It's been going on for millennia. We've been led to believe that history was written by the winners, and this is a somewhat lackluster metaphor in the current climate, but alas, one that still seems to hold true today, even as we sit on the cusp of relatively all information being accessible online. Is there something inside of our very nature as humans which we have been pre-programmed to accept the history the way it's been presented to us? Searching up and down the multiple different narratives regarding any given topic in history, the irony is not lost that in today's political climate, many forms of entertainment are now blasting us with the ideas of multiple timelines, multiple universes, the universes having adverse effects on our timeline, etc., etc. Just look at Marvel or any other piece of modern film, and the story is one that we see recycled over and over again. The question becomes, what about our distinct time in history has allowed for such conjecture to make its way into the mainstream entertainment sphere? And furthermore, if this is some sort of predictive programming for what is actually happening around us, could there be a possibility that behind the scenes, our history may be more of a jumbled mess of multiple unexplainable occurrences that have been streamlined through the powers that be? And could these powers that be still be manipulating the timeline? It doesn't matter what part of the world that you are in, if the history is taught, at least publicly, almost always it seems to align with the agreed upon history for that part of the world. For example, when we look at declassified alphabet agent documents which detail how the Russian government purposefully attempted to conceal, hide, and rewrite the history of Grand Tartary or the Tartarians, we can see that history is still being purposefully retold today, and it has occurred for millennia. We have entire aspects of history being rediscovered or finally understood, only to be silenced by the proverbial mainstream. Today, I'd like to rapidly run through the Chalcolithic historical period of Europe, as I believe it will shed light on some remarkably familiar points of contention as we discover and browse through what might be referred to as the earliest point in Tartarian and European history. I'm going to look to prove that there was one unified kingdom that entered and conquered Europe before written history even began. The European Chalcolithic period occurred from roughly 5000 BC through roughly 2000 BC, or began roughly 7,000 years ago. The Chalcolithic period is so important as it falls directly between the Neolithic Age and the Bronze Age, and the Chalcolithic is said to coincide with the Copper Age. For Europe, beginning roughly 7 millennia ago, it is believed the first Indo-European speakers landed in Europe, setting up megalithic cultures, who, for the first time in European history, began to construct massive feats of engineering, now referred to as megaliths. Now, this is all fine and dandy, but the current narrative, as we've been told hundreds of times before, has been constructed by those who are in control of painting the new picture of the world. We must try to peek through the blinders and see both sides, in some cases, numerous sides, to the same story. According to academia, in roughly 5000 BC, copper started being used in Europe. An introduction to the metal appears in Southeast Europe before spreading to Eastern and then Central Europe. Now, this is where we have our proverbial protagonist for this historical narrative enter the fray. That is the Pontic-Caspian Steppe Culture, also known as the Yamnaya culture or the pit grave culture. What makes the pit grave culture so unique? They appear to be the first culture in all of Europe to introduce burial mounds. The pit grave is essentially a rude understatement of the vast burial mounds, earthworks, and tumuli that the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture brought with them into Europe. And from 3500 BC onwards, the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture becomes the predominant culture of Europe. We're told the pit grave culture, these mound builders, quickly conquered what is today Western Russia and Ukraine, before migrating further inland, further north and west into the Balkans and Denmark. According to the Kurgan Hypothesis, with Kurgan meaning burial mound or tumuli, Kurgan also bears a striking resemblance to the word Kagan or Kayan or Cohen, also known as the Khan, the king, and a term that would become synonymous with the ruling class of ancient Europe. Through the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture, we're told the Indo-European language was introduced and spread throughout Europe, becoming the predominant language by 3000 BC. Meanwhile, aspects of the Pontic-Caspian Steppe mound builder culture flourished further into Europe, assimilating what is today the Czech Republic and Poland, while it appears an entirely royal class of these mound builders emerged from the lands that are today Bulgaria and Wallachia. This royal class constructed massive tumuli near the coast of the Black Sea and were inferred with the finest of jewelry, armor, weaponry, and complex copper tools. We're told in the earliest royal towns of the Pontic-Caspian mound builders, a specific importance was placed on labor specialization, on the reduction of the risk of invasion, and on gathering of materials to outlast strong weather events. Essentially, we're told the first major unified culture of Europe was the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture, which became the Indo-European cultures that all Europeans tie their ancestry to. However, amongst this steppe culture was a royal class whose fine cities had what we could see as the first jobs, the first day-to-day tasks, where one person would specialize in one duty and would do that duty every day. In such, we can see how the first cities of Europe arose, and indeed, we're told many of the smaller, non-royal settlements of Europe began to adopt these practices and then form their own cities. One of the most rapidly growing cities of Europe, which contributed heavily to the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture, was Troy. We've heard numerous ancient accounts of Troy and the Trojans, but it is now confirmed that Troy was a key component to the success of the European mound builders, as Troy developed into another of the earliest cities with distinct jobs and social organization. But Troy also provided much of the earliest advancements in metallurgy, which redefined the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture's ability to conquer and to defend their land. In the Rhine, a distinctly nomadic people were incorporated into the new Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture, and following this, a large portion of southern France and northern Italy converged and also joined the mound builder steppe culture, introducing flint to the greater parts of Europe. While the rapid unity amongst Europe is a clearly defined thing, we also have the clear signs of war during all of this development. Otzi, the Iceman, a natural mummy found in the Alps, discovered in near complete preservation in 1991, was said to have lived roughly 5,500 years ago at the time of the Indo-European mound builder conquest of Europe. He is Europe's oldest natural mummy. Otzi did not pass of natural causes. The Varna culture was believed to be one of the royal classes of the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture, as the Varna, as mentioned earlier, had vast burial mounds near the Black Sea where intricate trinkets and tools were discovered, including the oldest artifacts made of gold in human history, forged over 6,000 years ago. By roughly 3000 BC, the culture had advanced to creating new metal amalgamates, which included pseudo-copper. We're told these mound builders, the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture, completely conquered all of what is today Russia by roughly 2800 BC. We're also told the Pontic-Caspian Steppe Mound Builders are the direct ancestors of Iranians, meaning, for lack of a better term, in one way or another, we are all related. The megalithic Pontic-Caspian Steppe Mound Builder superculture, as it is known, then extended from the Middle East throughout all of Russia, north the whole way to Sweden, south to the southern tip of Spain, as well as including nearly all parts of Germany. The only parts of Europe that were not assimilated, we're told, were remote locations like high mountain peaks and islands far off the coast. The next occurrence changed history forever. By 2600 BC, megalithic towns with fortified walls, as if built by giants, began to arise throughout Europe, beginning with Estremadura on the coast of Portugal, and the other being the massive lost city of Miares in Almeria. It is well known that these two cities became the first major trade centers of Europe. At the time, in another part of the mound builder cultural sphere in France, a new, unexpected development arose, the bow and arrow, and its usage and perfection by a group known as the bowmen. With the new technology of archery, the Pontic-Caspian Steppe culture further strengthened their grip over Europe, at this time conquering most of France and what is today Belgium. We're told by 2500 BC, it appears the Indo-European steppe culture had adopted a sort of emblem or symbol, as owl plaques made of sandstone begin to be discovered throughout Europe, focused mainly in the area of Iberia. As we know, the owl has many esoteric ties in later history. From the earliest forms of artwork, like the owl, we see that the united European Pontic-Caspian steppe culture around 2500 BC, following the spread of archery, appears to become a little bit more compartmentalized. The mound builder culture grew into the catacomb culture, which itself was seemingly adjacent to the corded ware culture, who began weaving their way into everyday European life. The corded ware culture expanded north and conquered most of the Nordic world and Germany. We're told the royal elite of the Pontic-Caspian steppe culture eventually seemed to be replaced by something known as the beaker culture, essentially merchant priests who preferred being buried according to a very specific, invariable ritual. The beaker culture and their priests then spread throughout Europe, as each major town or settlement appeared to be given a member of this beaker culture to help in funerary rites and local traditions. This could very well be the origin of most European religion. The elite beaker culture, most likely the Khans or kings, the Kayans of the late Chalcolithic European age, moved the center of their culture to Bohemia, and from here they sent out their priests to the rest of Europe. Around 2100 BC, abruptly, we're told the Pontic-Caspian steppe culture elite, now called the beaker culture, left Germany for over 200 years, apparently abandoning that land until roughly 1900 BC. From here, Europe had already become entwined in the Bronze Age, and quickly the Pontic-Caspian steppe mound builder superculture, what I believe could be the earliest form of the Tartarians, with their megalithic structures and introduction of the world to the Indo-European language, which set the foundation for the entirety of Europe, this mound builder culture and history was almost entirely lost, assimilated and compartmentalized into more digestible pockets of history. The true nature of Europe, the real meat and potatoes of a unified European landscape, has been lost and demonized over the years, as anyone who seems to be searching for the truth has been labeled many things, nearly all of which are negative. But I am here today again trying to peel back the veil and fulfill the promise I made to you to always try to share the truth, even when it doesn't make the mainstream look good. Was there a unified society of ancient Europe who introduced a specific language, a specific type of architecture, a type of burial mound, who constructed massive earthworks and developed into a royal class which predated modern feudal systems? Remarkably, the answer is an overwhelming yes, and the truth, while watered down and hidden, will always come to the limelight. Furthermore, we have evidence that this massive mound builder culture actually extended far beyond just Europe and may have had their foothold in nearly every continent on Earth. But I will leave that for another video.